Check 1, 2.
Go! Curious about real estate? Yes! Then you've come to the right place. Get the knowledge you need. Get over the fear and get started. This is the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show with your host, Michael Quarles.
Hello, everybody. Michael Quarles with the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show. Gotta say, today's exciting. We are on podcast 188. 188. And I'm going to switch it up a little bit. We talked about this just not too long ago. And I am going to dive into a series talking about subject to investing. So we're going to do a podcast today about it. I'm going to introduce subject to investing. We'll do another one on the subject to presentation. We're going to do one on subject to how to put the deal together, the various types of deals. And then we're going to do one on subject to objection handlers. And then ultimately one on how you actually orchestrate it all, combine it all, the forms that you're going to need. How do you take care of everything you need to take care of? So we're going to do a series of podcasts solely directed at subject to. No, they're not going to be in order. So this is the first one. And today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what subject to investing is. Now, some of you may know, or some of you may think that subject to investing is illegal. It's not illegal. The legality issue, or part of the comment that a lot of people think or make about subject to investing, is the lender has the right to accelerate the due on sale clause. And we'll talk about that in a second. But that doesn't make it illegal. That just gives them the legal right to call the loan if the property has been transferred from one owner to another owner outside of a trust agreement, and that trust agreement being orchestrated correctly. So if I have a seller that wants to sell me a property and I buy it subject to the existing loan, and I then own the property, the loan's still attached to the property, using the property as collateral. I make my mortgage payments to the bank. I place my own insurance on the property. And the bank decides, since transfer of ownership has taken place, because I'm recording a document in the county recorder's office attesting to such, that they may go ahead and accelerate the due on sale clause. And that's fine. I'm fine with that. I have yet to have that ever happen. Do I anticipate it ever happening? We always have to anticipate the worst can happen. That's why things go so well, is because we're always looking at what could happen and we plan for those things. But right now, I want to talk about what subject to is. And subject to investing is the act of buying real estate, leaving the existing voluntary and involuntary liens in place. In other words, we're not going to be paying off the liens when we close escrow and get the deed on the property. So either we're going to get a grant deed or a warranty deed. We could get a quick claim deed that's uninsured. I would rather you always get insurance on your subject to purchases. But we're going to leave the voluntary and involuntary liens in place. So we're going to be buying it. The title company, escrow company, or closing attorney company, they're going to give us a preliminary title policy or review, and it's going to show that on this property is being used as collateral for various voluntary liens. So voluntary liens could be mortgages, loans, or stipulated judgments. So a stipulated judgment, say someone sued you, and because you owed them like $500. You owed them $500, they sued you. You agreed, rather than anything else, you went to court, you showed up at court and you say, I stipulate that I do in fact owe you the $500. So it's a stipulated judgment against your person. It's voluntary because you voluntarily stipulated to it. So those are voluntary liens that are going to show up. The other kind of lien that will show up are what we call involuntary lien. So an involuntary lien is a lien that you did not want to show up. So you didn't place it there on purpose. Involuntary liens could be like child support arrearages, Judgments. So someone sued you. You didn't go for a stipulated judgment. You didn't say, yes, I owe it. They sued you. They won. Now they have a judgment against you. Taxes. So IRS and state taxes can be an involuntary lien because they're against your person. Anything against your person that you hold title to is also attaching to real property. And then things like mechanics liens. Say you had a fence built in the backyard and you didn't pay the fence guy, and they decided to go ahead and put a mechanics lien to protect their right to collect the amount of money that was owed. So you have voluntary liens, things like mortgages, loans, stipulated judgments. Involuntary liens like child support, judgments, taxes, mechanics liens. And I'm always going to buy property subject to all of those. So I'm not going to pay off any of them. So let's, as an example, say I buy a house for $100,000. They owe Bank of America $50,000. That's a voluntary lien of $50,000. But maybe they owe IRS taxes of $5,000, and they have another $5,000 in child support, and they have a mechanics lien against the property as well for $500. Most people, most transactions, they would call you to pay off Bank of America's $50,000. They would call for the $5,000 to the IRS and the $5,000 child support and the $500 mechanics lien to be paid off from your proceeds. So if I gave $100,000 to the escrow or the closing company, they would give $50 to Bank of America, $5 to each of the IRS and the child support, and $500 to the mechanics lien. In my case, I'm not going to give $100,000 to closing. I'm going to take the $50,000 and the two $5,000 pieces, so 50 and the 5 for the IRS, the 5 for child support. That totals $60 plus $500 for the mechanics lien. That totals $60,500. I'm going to subtract that from the $100,000, and I'm going to give the balance if my purchase price is an all-cash purchase. I'm going to give the balance of that, so $60,500 minus $100. I'm going to give a check to the escrow closing company for $39,500. For a $100,000 piece of property, I'm going to leave the voluntary and involuntary liens in place and purchase that property. Now, when I do that, I have to be conscientious that the lender can accelerate the due on sale clause, that the IRS could accelerate and not accelerate, but establish a foreclosure and impound or repo, or however you want to call it, the property. I also know that the child support issue is there. And I also know that mechanics lien could go into foreclosure to protect their interest. I know that stuff. I know that in advance. I'm okay with that. Nothing's being concealed from me. I'm signing on the preliminary title policy that I'm aware, and I'm taking and purchasing the property subject to knowing that those encumbrances are against the property, that the property is being used as collateral on those items. And I'm okay with that. So the beautiful thing about doing it this way is the property doesn't have to qualify for a new lender. So in the traditional sense, that $100,000 piece of property, I would go out and get an appraisal on it. There would be minimum work requirements for the lender. There would be that big long waiting period just so I could pay the lender, the amount of money that I wanted to borrow. Well, in this case, the lender already has $50,000 against the property. Why pay them off just to give them the money again? Now, I understand they have the legal right to accelerate the due on sale clause, and we'll cover that in a second. But I don't need them to be paid off in order to buy it. And if they do accelerate the due on sale clause, then I just pay them off. So on one hand, if I said I don't want to buy subject to, I'm going to give the title and closing company $100,000 cash. They're going to pay all this stuff off. And the other way is I'm okay with buying subject to. And oh, by the way, if someone does accelerate or does start enacting foreclosure or what have you, I'm just going to give you the money anyway. So the worst thing that can happen in a subject to transaction from my perspective is what will happen if I don't buy the property subject to. So if I don't buy it subject to, I would just go ahead and pay off the lien and the mortgage and the IRS taxes and the child support arrearage and the mechanics lien. But if I am buying it subject to, then I'm not going to until I resell. Now, that doesn't even mean that I have to resell, because my buyer could buy it also subject to the existing voluntary and involuntary liens. Now, that's going to be later on in another podcast. We'll go over whether we should allow that to happen or not, but we can absolutely legally allow that to happen, assuming that we use the correct documents in the beginning of our purchase.
Thanks for listening. We'll be right back. Are you running out of leads? It's time you tried Yellow Letters at yellowletters.com. Get motivated seller leads through yellow letters, postcards, zip letters, typed professional letters, greeting cards, door hangers, and business cards. Yellow Letters is a full-service marketing company created with your success in mind. Get the personal attention you need to get your direct mail campaign started and get in touch at yellowletters.com.
And we are back in 3, 2, 1.
So let's go back to, is it illegal? And it isn't illegal at all. It's hogwash when someone says it's illegal. Now, some people try to put their properties into a land trust because the Grand Rundman Act said that you could, and you have 10% beneficial interest in a land trust, and blah, 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 and you could disguise the fact that you own it. Who cares? Really, people? Why disguise it? Why tell a lie? Let's not tell lies here. Let's tell the truth. Tell Mr. and Mrs. Lender, I bought the property. I understand that you have a clause in your loan that says, or in your note, that says you can accelerate the due on sale. I understand that. I'm fine with it. Accelerate it all you want if you want. Or continue to allow me to make the payments, because that's the business you're in. You're in the business not to call loans. You're in the business to collect a monthly payment on time by a party that's responsible to pay that payment. And in most cases, we are a better risk to the lender than their borrower was. In most cases. So if that's the case, isn't there an upside also to the lender? Where's the downside to the lender when the party that bought the house subject to the existing loan is actually making the payments on time? Where's the downside? Where's the risk? There isn't any. So have that argument, and I can have another argument that says the moment they start accepting my payments, after certain payments, they're starting to acknowledge that it's okay for me to make the payment. Because if it wasn't, why'd they accept it? Why did they continue? They knew that I bought it because I gave constructive notice when I recorded the deed in the county recorder's office and showed myself being the owner of the property. So the moment I gave constructive notice, I started sending them payments. I put the insurance in my name, and when I purchased the property, I did not ask for a refinance payoff. I asked for a purchase payoff on the loan. And there's a difference between a refinance payoff on a loan and a payoff on a loan. So if I asked for a refinance, the lender could think at that point, well, the house isn't being sold, they're just refinancing their mortgage. But when I tell them I want a payoff, as if it's a purchase, I'm telling them someone is buying the property. Give me the payoff, the beneficiary statement based upon that fact. They cannot come back to me and say I hid anything, because I haven't. I've put insurance in my name. I've recorded a constructive notice deed. I've let them know on the payoff, and I've been sending the mortgage payments in my name. I'm not disguising who's sending them the payments. So, I get excited about this stuff, but stuff's important. Okay? There's nothing illegal associated with buying houses subject to the existing voluntary and involuntary liens. Now, there could be things illegal about how you resell it if you don't do it ethically and morally and legally, but we're talking about buying right here, okay? And please, again, do not hide the purchase, okay? Don't hide the fact that you're the guy or the gal that's buying the property, that the property's changing hands. You don't need to, okay? So, why is there a due on sale clause in a mortgage? Because on a seller carryback, there's not one. Seller carrybacks don't have a due on sale. Seller carryback, you can sell it to somebody else and they can't foreclose because They don't have one. You didn't put it in there. So they can't argue with you. But why do they have that right? Well, they put it in their note. It's part of their note. It's part of the instruction. It's part of what the terms of their note. Okay, just like the term of their note was you're going to pay so much money back, you're going to pay so much interest, you're going to have an impound account, whatever the terms are, you have the terms. I just can't see the negative to the lender as long as you do, in fact, make the mortgage payment. Okay? But the reason I think that some people find it a negative, like gooey, icky kind of stuff, slimy, because it is here's an example. You bought a boat. You sold your boat to your friend, and he couldn't pay you all of it. So he sold it to him, and you said, okay, give me $2,000 down, and I'll finance $10,000 for you. Give me $50 a month. And next water season, you see your friend, and he's got a brand new boat out there on the water, and you don't remember ever getting paid off on your boat. You keep getting the monthly mortgage payment that you sold it to him. That he promised to pay, but you don't. Where's the boat? You didn't get paid off, but he's got a brand new boat. So you ask him, say, hey, friend, what happened to the boat? And he says, oh, I sold it to a friend of mine. Yeah, he's making me payments just like you said I could make you, and it's kind of worked out cool. You'd feel a little like, oh, that didn't feel good. Right? Probably ought not to do that to your friends. Okay? We're talking business and lenders here. I'm not so certain you can have a friend that's a lender or a lender that's a friend. So that's why there's these clauses here, because you don't know your friend's friend who decided to go ahead and buy the boat from your friend. You don't know whether or not they're a good credit risk. So the lender, and the same way with the lender, they don't know that we're a good credit risk. So they've put inside of their note the ability to call the note in case we're not a good credit risk or in case they choose to on transfer. It's a way for them to protect themselves. But as long as we're making the payment on time, why do they need to protect themselves? Now here's an example of why maybe they would want to protect themselves. Say, for instance, you bought a house subject to the existing loan, and that loan was 2%. In today's current marketplace, money is being lent at 10%. Now, would it be in the lender's best advantage or better advantage to go ahead and accelerate the due on sell clause because they're only collecting 2%, and on that transfer, they know that they can turn the $50,000 in our example into, instead of a 2% producing loan, they could turn it into a 10% producing loan or an 8% producing loan, a higher interest rate. And sure, in that example, it's to the lender's benefit to go ahead and do that for us. Okay? But that's rare. It's rare. And the reverse is also true. If we buy a house that has an existing loan on it that has a 10% mortgage, and we start making payments at 10%, and the current mortgage rate is 2%, it's an advantage, a high and huge advantage to the lender to leave that loan in place. Okay? So here's the actual wording. It's paragraph 17 of the standard single-family purchase contract, purchase form, which is used by almost every mortgage company for 1 to 4 unit mortgages in the U.S. It reads, transfer of the property or beneficial interest in borrower. If all or any part of the property or any interest in it is sold or transferred, or if a beneficial interest in borrower is sold or transferred, and borrower is not a natural person without lender's prior written approval or consent, lender may, at its option, may is a big word. May is a big word in this paragraph. At its option, require immediate payment in full of all sums secured by the security instrument. However, this option shall not be exercised by lender if exercise is prohibited by the federal law as of the date of this security agreement. So you can see that word may is an extremely important word. It doesn't say is required to. It is their sole discretion. They may exercise their right to accelerate the due on sell clause. Have I heard that that's been done in the past? Yes. Has it been done to me? No. And I think it's an important piece or component in the strategy of buying houses subject to the existing loan. Remember, buying houses subject to the existing loan is the fastest and easiest way to get a home sold and a home purchased. Because the home's qualified already. There's a loan on the property already. If we're going to do anything else, we're going to pay off that loan. We're going to requalify the home to a new loan, qualify for that new loan, and go through that. And the timetable for that is enormous nowadays. It's like 60 days. Well, if a seller has to move now, they don't typically have 60 days. So it's a great way for the seller to get what they want and at the time they want. It's a great way for the buyer who may be limited on resource to buy houses. Does this make sense? I hope so. This is going to conclude the first piece of the many podcasts we're going to have or episodes we're going to have on Subject To. So I'm going to pick it up from here. We're going to continue down this path until I've exhausted Subject To investing. Until next time, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show. Get more info and stay in touch at michaelquarles.com.